My friends, have you ever paused to notice that when we quarrel with another, we do not merely shout in anger, nor do we simply bite and claw as animals would. Instead, we justify ourselves. We say things like, "That's not fair," or "You promised me," or "How would you like it if someone did that to you?" Even in our most heated disputes, there emerges something remarkable. Both sides appeal, not to brute force, but to a standard higher than either of them. They do not merely mean, "I dislike what you've done." They mean, "You ought not to have done it." And so, without even thinking, we reveal that we believe in a law above us, a moral law as real as gravity and as inescapable as the beating of our own hearts. This is the strange paradox. Though each of us often breaks it, none of us can quite rid ourselves of the sense that it is there, speaking with a quiet authority that is not of our making. Now, when I speak of the law of human nature, I do not mean the laws of nature that describe how rocks fall or rivers run. Those laws tell us what things do. They have no choice in the matter. The stone does not deliberate before it drops to the ground. The stars do not pause to consider whether they ought to burn. But human beings, here lies the mystery, are aware of what they ought to do, and yet often choose otherwise. The moral law does not describe our behavior as it is. It prescribes what it should be. And when we fail, we feel the sting of conscience, like a tuning fork struck wrongly against its note. This sense of oughtness, this inward compass, is not a fancy of religion, nor the invention of any government or tribe. It is older than nations, deeper than culture. Civilizations differ, yes, but not so completely as to erase the common thread. The Greeks spoke of justice, the Hindus of Dharma, the Chinese of the way. Even in lands far apart, the echo is the same. Courage is praised, cowardice despised, honesty is honored, treachery condemned, mercy is admired, cruelty abhorred. The accents vary, but the song is recognizably one. And what are we to make of this law, this silent standard that sits enthroned above our whims? If it were merely instinct, like hunger or thirst, it could not judge between our instincts. Hunger tells me to eat. Love for my child tells me to give her my portion. When these clash, it is the moral law that weighs them and declares which must prevail. It does not come from instinct. It is the judge of instincts. Nor is it mere social convention, for we do not praise reformers for bowing to custom, but for challenging it in the name of something higher. When Wilberforce opposed the slave trade, he did not say, "Society dislikes it." He said, "It is wrong." In that wrong lies a voice greater than fashion, a summons more enduring than decree. You see, then, why this law is so haunting. It is not an ornament to life, something we may take up or set aside like a hobby. It binds us all, and yet here comes the deepest tension. Though we know it, we do not keep it. None of us lives as we believe we ought. We make promises and break them. We speak truth and then fall into lies. We judge another harshly for the very failings we excuse in ourselves. The law of human nature shines as a light, and yet in that very light it exposes our shadows. It does not flatter us, it convicts us. And this, perhaps, is why so many try to forget it, to explain it away. For if there is indeed such a law, then it points beyond us to a lawgiver. Its voice is not ours, though it speaks within us. It does not bend to our convenience, though we bend it often enough in excuse. It stands unyielding, like a plumb line against which all crooked beams are revealed. To deny it is to saw off the very branch upon which we sit, for even the denial is made in its terms. It is unjust. It is unkind. It is false. Do you not see? We smuggle in the law even while denying it, just as a thief may cry foul when another steals from him. But let us pause here. For if we have discovered that such a law exists, and that it presses upon every soul with a demand we cannot fully meet, then we are standing on the very threshold of the greatest question of all. What does this mean about the universe and about the God who made it? If the law of human nature is real, and surely it is, for we all feel it tugging at our conscience, then we must admit it tells us something about the universe itself. For if there exists a moral law that judges men, then the universe is not indifferent. It is not the silent, cold machinery of stars wheeling through an empty sky. It is, rather, the handiwork of a mind that cares about right and wrong, that expects of us a certain harmony, a certain faithfulness to the tune he has written into the very fabric of our being. Now, one might be tempted to think of this mind, this lawgiver, as a grim policeman, lurking to punish us for every misstep. But such a picture is far too small, for the law is not merely about rules, it is about relationship. A musician who despises the score does not merely break a rule, he ruins the music. A painter who ignores the colors of light does not simply err, he mars the canvas. So too, when we resist the law, we are not simply transgressors of some arbitrary decree, we are rebels against the grain of reality itself. The moral law is the score of the great composer, meant not to bind our freedom, but to draw us into harmony. Yet, as I said before, we have not kept it, and this is the uncomfortable truth that confronts us. If the law reflects the nature of its author, then the author must be good, good beyond all our imagining. But if we, the creatures made in his image, cannot even keep the faint reflection of that goodness inscribed in our hearts, then what are we but broken instruments? It is here that the joy and terror mingle. For the same law that tells us what God is like also tells us that we have not lived in step with him. It whispers both of his purity and of our corruption. And still, this whisper is not despair alone. For what does it mean that we feel guilty at all? A machine does not feel shame for failing to function. It merely ceases to work. Only a soul can say, I ought to have done better. That sting of conscience, painful though it is itself a sign of hope. It is the pulse of a heart not wholly dead, the mark of a creature that yet belongs to the light. Our very failure testifies that we are called to something higher than failure, that the same God who judges is also the one who awakens us to seek mercy. Think of it like homesickness. When you stand on a hillside at dusk, watching the horizon burn with gold, and you feel that strange ache, that longing for something you cannot name, there too the law of human nature is at work. For it is not content merely to tell us what we ought to do. It awakens in us a desire for the good, the true, the beautiful, and this desire insatiable on earth is the secret evidence that we were made for more than earth. If the universe were nothing but blind chance, why should we not be perfectly at home here? Yet we are not. We stumble, we hunger, we strive. Our hearts are restless because we were made for a rest not found in this world, But let us not run too quickly ahead, for the law of human nature, before it becomes a promise, is first a diagnosis. It shows us the crack in the bell, the discord in the note, the fracture in the soul. And until we admit this, until we confess that we have not lived as we ought, there can be no cure. A man who denies his sickness will never seek the physician. And yet, once he does admit it, the whole horizon of hope opens before him. So then, we have seen that there is a law written upon the heart of man, that it speaks with a voice not of his own making, that it reveals both the goodness of God and the failure of mankind, and that, in revealing the failure, it points us toward a greater need. The question that now confronts us is this: if the lawgiver is just, how can the unjust be reconciled to him? That, my friends, is the hinge upon which everything turns. We have before us the law of human nature, stern yet luminous, unyielding yet strangely tender. It convicts us, and in that very conviction it points to our deepest need. The question is not whether the law exists. It does. The question is, what can be done about our failure to keep it? For a broken instrument cannot repair itself, nor can a crooked beam straighten by its own effort. If we are to be healed, the remedy must come from beyond us. Consider again the idea of law in human affairs. When we break the civil law, there are consequences, and rightly so. Yet justice alone cannot restore us. A judge may punish a thief, but punishment does not transform the thief's heart. It is only when mercy enters, when forgiveness is offered and received, that something new begins to grow. Now, if this is true among men, how much more in the dealings of God? The law of human nature is not merely a courtroom summons. It is the call of a father to his wandering children. Its purpose is not only to convict, but to draw us back to himself. Yet, how can such a return be possible? For the gap is not small. It is not that we have made one or two mistakes and might mend them with a little effort. No. The law has shown us that our very nature is bent, that pride, selfishness, and fear run like cracks through the whole structure of our being. If a portrait is marred by a single blot, one might retouch it. But if the entire canvas has been smeared, then what is needed is nothing less than a new creation. And here is where Christianity speaks with a voice unlike any other. It tells us that God has not left us to our ruin. The very one whose purity exposes our guilt has also stooped to bear it. The lawgiver himself has entered the story, not merely to judge but to redeem. He has stepped into history in the person of Jesus Christ, taking upon himself the weight of our failure, so that the law's demand might be fulfilled and its curse lifted. The stern voice that once condemned us has, through the cross, become the gentle voice that calls us home. Do you see the wonder? The law, once our accuser, becomes our schoolmaster leading us to grace. Like a tutor sternly correcting a pupil, it brings us to the point of despair in ourselves, so that at last we may despair of ourselves and trust in another. And in that trust, in that surrender, we find that the harmony we could not produce on our own is given to us as a gift. The music of obedience becomes possible again, not by our strength, but by His Spirit. But more than this, the law of human nature, once a source of fear, becomes for the redeemed soul a delight. No longer is it the harsh reminder of a standard forever out of reach. It is the promise of what we are being remade to become. It is like the pattern traced faintly in a tapestry that at last is filled with rich colors. The Christian does not escape the law, but fulfills it. Not as a slave obeying a master, but as a son reflecting the image of his Father. And so, the compass within us, once felt as a burden, becomes a guide. The ought that once condemned becomes the yes of joy. The law that once whispered of judgment now sings of life. And that life, my friends, is nothing less than communion with the God who is both the author of the law and the giver of grace. But perhaps you will ask, if this is true, why then does the world remain so broken? Why do we still see cruelty, falsehood, and hatred even among those who name his name? Ah, but here we must remember that the work is not yet finished. The law still does its work, still convicts, still presses us toward humility. And grace still does its greater work, slowly reshaping us into the likeness of Christ. We are like rough stones in the hands of a master sculptor, chipped, cracked, yet destined to become something glorious. The law is the chisel that cuts. Grace is the vision that guides the hand. And so we stand in this tension, judged yet forgiven, broken yet being remade, convicted yet consoled. The law remains not to crush us, but to keep us ever leaning upon the one who alone can fulfill it in us. Thus, the law of human nature, far from being a cold abstraction, is in truth a doorway. It opens not merely upon our guilt, but upon the grace of God. It shows us both our ruin and our rescue, our poverty and his riches, our need and his sufficiency. It is the compass pointing us to a home we could never have reached without him. And now, having followed this compass so far, we must ask, what lies at the journey's end? What is the destiny of the soul that heeds both the law's warning and the gospel's promise? The law of human nature, as we have seen, is no idle ornament to life. It is a voice that calls us forward, a compass pointing to a destiny beyond the horizons of this world. If it were merely a set of prohibitions, it would weary us. If it were merely a record of our failures, it would crush us. But in the hands of God, it becomes a signpost toward hope. It reminds us that the life we live here is not the final act, but the prelude to a far greater symphony. Imagine, for a moment, a traveler who has wandered far from his homeland. At first, he delights in strange sights and novel pleasures, but soon enough, weariness sets in. He remembers faintly the fragrance of his own fields, the laughter of familiar voices, the hearth fire that once warmed him. That longing is what the moral law does within us. It stirs in us the ache of exile. It tells us that we were meant for another country, a country where love is pure, where justice and mercy embrace, where joy is not fleeting but everlasting. But note this carefully. The law itself cannot get us there. A compass can point north, but it cannot walk the miles for us. It tells us the way, but it cannot carry us along it. That is why, without grace, the law becomes despair. We know the direction, but we lack the strength. We see the home, but we are stranded in the far country. Herein lies the gospel's glory. The very King of that country has come to fetch us. Christ not only shows the way, he is the way. He not only interprets the law, he fulfills it in himself. And what then becomes of the moral law for those who belong to him? It ceases to be merely a record of debts and becomes a tutor of delight. Like a child learning the notes of music, faltering at first, we are led by the Spirit until the melody becomes second nature. In the end, heaven itself will be the full harmony of all wills, gladly conformed to the will of God. The law will no longer stand over us as an accuser, but will live within us as joy. For what else is eternal life but the free and happy concord of creatures with their Creator? I will not pretend this is easy. The journey toward such conformity is long and often painful. The chiseling of the sculptor hurts the stone, and the pruning of the vine stings the branch. But we must remember, the blows of the chisel are not random. They are guided by a vision. The cuts of the gardener are not cruel. They are shaped by love. So too, the moral law, joined with the grace of God, is fashioning us into something far beyond what we can imagine. When at last we see what we have become, we shall scarcely recognize ourselves, for we shall reflect the likeness of Christ. And here lies the final secret. The law of human nature, which at first seemed only a burden, is in truth the seed of glory. It begins as a whisper of ought within the heart, grows into a longing for holiness, and flowers at last into the joy of heaven. It is not a chain, but a key, not a prison, but a doorway. Those who follow it to its end will find that it leads not into despair, but into the very arms of God. So, my friends, let us not despise that inner voice. Let us not ignore it when it stings, nor silence it when it calls us higher. For it is the echo of the eternal within us, the gentle tug of the Father drawing his children home. And if we heed it, it will not lead us astray. It will lead us to him. And now, if you have found something of value in these reflections, I would invite you to remain with us. Share these words with others who may be searching. Leave your thoughts, for they may guide another pilgrim on the road. And do not forget to subscribe, that together we may continue exploring these great truths week by week, step by step, as fellow travelers longing for the same eternal country. For the journey is long, but the destination is glorious, and every compass point of conscience, every whisper of the law within, is telling us the same thing. There is a home, and we are meant for it. The law of human nature, this inner compass, is no small thing. It is not a curious quirk of psychology, nor a relic of culture. It is the very evidence that the universe is moral, that goodness and truth are not inventions of our preference, but realities written into the grain of existence. And when we hear its voice, whether as the quiet rebuke of conscience or the soaring call toward nobility, we are hearing, faintly yet unmistakably, the whisper of the one who made us. But we must not stop there, for if the law reveals God's character, then it also reveals our failure. Every one of us has fallen short. We do not keep the standard even we ourselves proclaim. We demand honesty, yet are not always honest. We praise courage, yet yield to cowardice. We exalt mercy, yet withhold it. The law shines upon us, and in its light we see our stains. If it were only this, then indeed we might despair. For who can stand before such purity? Who can bear the weight of such truth? And yet, here is the marvel. The God whose holiness convicts us is the same God whose love redeems us. He has not left us to perish under the law's judgment. Instead, he has entered our world taken our nature, borne our failures, and offered us forgiveness. In Christ, the Lawgiver himself has come, not merely to point out the path, but to walk it in our place and to open it for us. The burden that once crushed us has become the yoke that is easy and the burden that is light, for we do not carry it alone. This is why the moral law, once feared, becomes beloved. For the Christian, it is no longer the voice of an enemy, but of a friend. It is the gentle schooling of a father, training his children for the life of heaven. In that life to come, there will be no conflict between desire and duty, no tension between what we want and what we ought. The law will be written perfectly within, and obedience will be indistinguishable from joy. Imagine a bird struggling to fly when its wings are broken. That is our condition now. But imagine the same bird when its wings are healed, when flight is no longer an effort, but the very expression of its being. That is the promise of heaven. To live so wholly in tune with God that holiness is not imposed from without, but flows freely from within. Until that day, we live in the in-between. We stumble, yet rise again. We fall short, yet are forgiven. The law keeps us humble, and grace keeps us hopeful. Both are necessary. The law reminds us that we are not God. Grace reminds us that God is for us. The law is the stern voice that says, "You must." Grace is the tender voice that says, "You can, for I am with you." Together, they lead us not to despair, but to transformation. And so, the law of human nature is revealed to be more than a mere standard. It is a mercy in disguise, for by showing us our need, it drives us to the source of mercy. By showing us our incompleteness, it awakens in us the longing for completion. By showing us our exile, it sets us yearning for home. And that yearning, that homesickness of the soul, is the very thread by which God draws us to himself. My friends, let us then be attentive to this compass within. Let us not dismiss it as mere sentiment, nor drown it in noise. It is the echo of eternity, the mark of our Maker, the pathfinder that leads us through the wilderness of life. And if we follow it faithfully, if we let it lead us beyond ourselves and into his grace, then we shall find that it has been pointing us all along to the only true north, the heart of God. So I leave you with this thought. The law of human nature is not merely about what we ought to do. It is about who we are meant to become. It is the divine melody that will, in the end, be sung by every redeemed heart in the great chorus of heaven. To heed it is to begin already to tune one's life to that eternal song. And if these reflections have stirred something in you, if you have felt the tug of that compass within, then I would ask you to journey further with us. Like, comment, and share, that others too may hear. And do subscribe, so that together we may continue to walk this path of truth and grace as fellow travelers guided by the same light. For the voice within us is not our enemy. It is the music of our true home, beckoning us onward. And to follow it, with God's help, is to find not bondage, but freedom, not despair, but hope, not exile, but everlasting joy. The law of human nature is at first sight a stern thing. It speaks with a voice we did not invent and cannot silence. It reminds us of what we ought to be and reveals what we are not. For this reason, many try to ignore it, or drown it in the noise of pleasure, ambition, or distraction. But no matter how far we run, we cannot quite escape it. It waits for us in the quiet moments when the laughter has faded and the lights have dimmed. Then, like the tolling of a distant bell, we hear again the call of conscience, the reminder that there is a standard above our whims, a truth above our opinions, a goodness that will not bend to suit our convenience. This is not meant to torment us. It is meant to awaken us. For the law, though stern, is in fact merciful. A compass that points unerringly north may frustrate the wanderer who wishes to go his own way, but in the end it is his salvation. Without it, he would be lost forever. So too with the law written on our hearts. Its rebuke is a form of love, for it refuses to flatter us into ruin. It tells us the truth, even when the truth hurts, and only those who face the truth can ever be healed. Yet here lies the mystery. The law not only condemns, it also beckons. It does not merely say, "You have fallen short." It also whispers, "You were meant for more." It is the echo of a homeland we have not yet seen, but for which we were made. Why is it that the stories we love most are those of heroes who fight for justice, of lovers who remain true, of sacrifices that save the undeserving? Why do such tales stir us so deeply, as if striking a hidden chord in the soul? It is because they remind us of the law's true source, the very character of God Himself. We recognize goodness when we see it, because it is the pattern stamped upon us from the beginning. And when we feel that peculiar longing, that wistful ache that nothing in this world can fully satisfy, we are again in the presence of the law. For it not only tells us what we ought to do, but awakens in us a desire for the good, the true, the beautiful. Earthly joys are but shadows. They point beyond themselves to the substance. The sunset hints at a greater light. The music hints at a greater harmony. The love between two souls hints at a love that is eternal. This is why even the best things of earth leave us with a kind of sweet restlessness. They are not the final feast. They are appetizers of a banquet still to come. But here is the crucial point. We cannot reach that banquet by the law alone. The law is the map, not the destination. It shows us the way, but it cannot carry us there. Indeed, if we rely upon it alone, it will condemn us, for none of us has kept it perfectly. We may climb a little way up the mountain of virtue, but the peak remains far beyond us. And if heaven is the summit of that mountain, then we are helpless without a guide and a rescuer. This is why Christianity is not merely advice, but good news. It does not say, "Try harder to keep the law, and perhaps God will accept you." It says, "The Lawgiver Himself has descended the mountain to carry you upward." The moral law drives us to despair of ourselves, and in that despair we discover grace. We learn that the judge is also the Savior, that the one who gave the law has also fulfilled it on our behalf. At the cross, justice and mercy meet. The law is honored, and the sinner is forgiven. There, the compass finds its true north, for in Christ we see the perfect union of truth and love. And what does this mean for us here and now? It means that the law, once our accuser, becomes our teacher. It still convicts us, yes, but now it convicts in order to heal. It shows us where we must grow, but not with the voice of condemnation, rather with the voice of a father training his child. Each failure becomes an invitation to lean more fully on grace. Each success becomes a foretaste of glory. Slowly, sometimes painfully, yet always surely, we are being reshaped. The crooked beam is being straightened, the cracked bell is being tuned, the broken image is being restored. And at last, when the great day comes, the law will cease to stand over us as an external command, for it will be written perfectly within. Heaven is not a place of endless rules, but of perfect harmony. There, every heart will desire only what is good, and so every action will be both free and holy. Duty and delight will be one. What we ought to do will be what we most deeply wish to do. That is the destiny toward which the law is leading us. Not slavery, but freedom. Not drudgery, but joy. So then, let us not despise this compass within us. It is God's great gift, a guide for our wandering, a reminder of our true home. Let us hear its warnings, and let us heed its call. For though it wounds only to heal. Though it humbles only to lift us up. And if we follow it faithfully, it will lead us, step by step, into the very presence of the One who is both the author of the law and the giver of grace. And so, dear friends, if these words have stirred your heart, I invite you to remain with us on this journey. Share them with others who may also be listening for the voice within. Leave your reflections, that we may encourage one another as fellow pilgrims. And do not forget to subscribe, so that, together, we may continue exploring these timeless truths. For the law of human nature is not merely about rules and prohibitions. It is about the call of God, written upon the heart, guiding us home. And to listen to it, to follow it, is to begin already to taste the joy of heaven. And now, as we draw these reflections to their close, let us gather the threads into one. The law of human nature is not a theory to be debated, nor a mere curiosity of philosophy. It is the steady voice that has spoken to every generation, whispering in palaces and cottages, in marketplaces and monasteries alike. It is the voice that tells us we are not our own masters, that there is a goodness to which we are answerable, and that to resist it is to resist not merely an idea, but reality itself. At first, this may seem a hard word. Who among us has not failed? Who among us can stand unashamed before the measure of true goodness? The law does not flatter. It exposes. It tells us that we are broken instruments, out of tune with the music of creation. But in that very exposure lies our hope. For what sense would there be in shame if we were not made for something better? What sense would there be in longing if there were not a fulfillment? The law is like the diagnosis that precedes the cure, the first crack of dawn that heralds the coming day. And what a cure has been given! For the one who inscribed this law upon our hearts has himself descended into our darkness. He has borne the weight of our failure, not to crush us with it, but to lift us from it. In Christ, justice is satisfied, and mercy is poured out. In Him, the law that once accused us is transfigured into a song of freedom. What once bound us in guilt now guides us in joy. We do not obey to earn His love. We obey because we have already been loved beyond measure. Picture a bird with broken wings flapping helplessly against the air. That is what we were under the law alone, aware of flight, yet unable to rise. But picture the same bird healed, soaring effortlessly into the sky. That is what grace does. It restores us to the life for which we were made. The law remains, but no longer as a heavy burden. It becomes the melody we were born to sing. And this, dear friends, is the destiny toward which every heartbeat of conscience points us. Not endless rules, not dreary restraint, but freedom in its truest sense. The freedom of a soul wholly aligned with its Maker. The freedom of joy without shadow, of love without end. That is the home for which we were fashioned. The law is the compass. Christ is the way. Heaven is the country to which we journey. So let us not silence that inner voice. Let us welcome its rebuke, cherish its guidance, and follow it into the arms of the one who gave it. For to heed it is not bondage, but the beginning of eternal joy. And if these thoughts have spoken to you, I would invite you to journey with us further. Like this message, share it with those who may be searching. Leave your reflections below and subscribe to this channel. Together, let us walk as pilgrims, guided by the compass within, until at last we arrive at our true and everlasting home.